What's up, guys? Yeah, there it is. Sorry. Making mistakes all the time. Looked down and saw the mic wasn't there, and I was like, I swear I plugged this thing. Yeah. I had it off to the side. Anyways, I hope you guys are doing well. Surprising news. The Fed has found out that, inflation affects households in a different way, depending on your income, obviously. Um, so you would think it'd be a little bit self-explanatory, but at least now we have actual numbers behind this. At least according to a speech from Lael Brainard, one of the governors. But let's go right over to a transcript of the speech that you can always just find on the Fed's website. They post all of those. Okay, we good? Make it a bit bigger, sure I'm not blocking you. Okay, so yeah, just seems like this was done at a research conference. Says Opportunity and Inclusive Growth Institute from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. Seems to be where it was held. Basically, while national data do not directly disaggregate the differential effects of inflation by household income groups, a variety of evidence suggests that lower income households disproportionately feel the burden of high inflation. What a surprise. Lower income families expend a greater share of their income on necessities. What a surprise. Having smaller financial cushions. Wow. And may have less ability to switch to lower priced alternatives, probably because they're already there. And I guess a bit of a disclaimer, this is coming from someone who is very much raised in a blue collar family, we'll just say that, and is very much not well off. And so all of this stuff is, you would have thought was common sense if you thought about it. But I think a lot of people understand it to begin with. It just takes like a little bit of thinking. I think it's mostly, at least now there's numbers and stuff behind it as well, like exact percentages and stuff like that. And so it seems like basically the entire argument for this is on how they measure the CPI and the PCE, which if one, the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and then PCE is Personal Consumption Expenditures, which is another index. They like indexes or indices. But in case you guys didn't know what those were, so there's that. And basically, using a national average of consumer expenditures to weight the categories have intuitive appeal. This measure is particularly useful, for example, in adjusting measures of overall expenditure for changes in prices to determine how much real growth has occurred between two periods. However, using a national average of expenditures to weight the categories has limitations when it comes to representing the true cost of living experienced by different types of households. Okay. In an academic sense, indices are great in looking at major macro trends and stuff like that. But if you're going to talk about, a lot of the times, those big numbers, kind of in the nature of what it seems, whenever you extrapolate something to the extent of like a whole country or even states or small economies, whatever you want to talk about. The further and further you go out, the bigger and bigger of a picture you look, the more out of tune you're going to be with the individual, right? And so one of the things that she does bring up in her speech is, the CPI, yes, it's what is it? It's like 8.5% now or something, or 8. It has an 8 handle. I don't remember exactly what's afterwards, but doesn't really matter. That doesn't mean, let's just say it's 8%. So it doesn't mean every household is experiencing 8% inflation. because for some it'll be higher, for some it'll be lower, and for various reasons, right? Not just because of what they buy, but like how much of the income of their income it is they use to buy it. And so I actually highlighted it further, and I'll just re-bring that up whenever we get to the actual numbers and stuff. And so basically, instead, because the CPI and PCE indexes weight every dollar expenditure equally, these indexes implicitly weight each household's cost of living proportionally to their total expenditures. Um, so basically, the argument for this was like, you have, how to word this. So they're weighting each dollar equally on a, okay, so it's like you imagine like someone has like $100 or whatever. So each dollar is 1% of their income. We're just going to do this based off income to make math easy. Um, so if they spend $30 on food, that's 30% of their income, right? They got 30 baskets or whatever. Um, so basically, if you make that to where there's 1,000%, there's $1,000, and you weight everything equally. Um, for someone to have And for someone in that situation to have a 30% weighting or whatever in food and groceries, it would be $300, right? And so it's 10 times more food and stuff because they had 10 times the income. And that's kind of what the PCE and CPI do is it's an index. You're kind of picking a base year or situation or whatever the case may be and being like, this is 100, this is how it is. This is how this measure changes with time relative to that base year or situation, whatever the case may be. And I'm pretty sure for the CPI, it's a base year. They do that with the GDP deflator as well. So basically, the difference between showing the cost of living proportional to their income rather than like sorry, let me rephrase that. So basically, they're changing or they're discussing the indices, right? So right now the indices weight every dollar of expenditure equally instead of weighting them proportionally to the person's living, right? And to the amount they actually expend. So one of the reasons how this changes is first for low and moderate income households, inflation that diverges from the average. Wow. I cannot talk today for some reason. I'm so sorry. First, low and moderate income households could experience inflation that diverges from the average because their consumption baskets differ dramatically from the average. Um, so, I mean, if you don't have as much money, you're not going to buy a certain amount of things. Like you're not going to buy like enough as much steak as someone who has more money, or a nicer car. You're going to have more kind of I guess beaters in a way. You're not going to have a newer car, things like that. And they actually said or found that lower income households spend 77% of their income on necessities, more than double the 31% of income spent by higher income households on those categories. Um, and that's footnote 11. I forgot to look at what exactly that was. The values of the share of income spent in each category were constructed using microdata from the 2020 Consumer Expenditure Interview Survey for full income, but disclaimer stuff. Not so they got from that CEX survey thing, which might be interesting to look into if I can find my spot again. Right. And so what I thought was pretty interesting is they actually had a working paper from the BLS that looked at data from 2003 to 2018. And they found that the price index reflecting the consumer basket for households in the lowest income quartile grew faster than the overall CPI, while the price index reflecting the consumer basket for households in the highest income quartile grew more slowly than the CPI. So basically, what they did was they separated the households, and they changed the weightings in the CPI to more accurately reflect the actual expenditures of that group. And they found that the lowest income ones grew faster than the overall CPI, and the highest income households grew more slower than the overall CPI. Now, this might have a lot, without looking at the actual paper, um, I would assume a lot of that has to do with food and energy, which is, a lot of the times excluded from certain CPI prints. Um, a lot of the times you look at the CPI X food and energy because they're so volatile or whatever the reasoning is. Um, and well, food and energy is like the majority of the bills for lower income individuals, excluding like rent, I guess you could say, which could be a part of utilities and such, depending on the situation, obviously, and your lease and whatever. But yeah, definitely want to read that paper now. So to continue, this consideration brings us to the second point. Households with different levels of income may purchase significantly different items, even within the same elementary index category for goods and services. So one of the problem with the indexes is that it's categorizing things and it's grouping them together in a big thing. It's just saying food here, and then it's saying energy here, whatever, and then they weight them respectively. But with the example they give, I think she gives it later. Um, like the difference, or actually right here. Um, to take an extreme example, she brings up caviar and canned tuna. They're both in the food indice or whatever. They're both food, but one is a lot more expensive than the other one. I buy canned tuna on a regular basis. I don't think I've ever bought caviar, to be honest. Um, no, I don't think I've ever bought it. Um, So yeah, there's that as well. Third, households at different income levels may have differing abilities to substitute for lower priced alternatives within an elementary category. So it's keeping the example of food, um, basically going the great value route. You're no longer getting name brand cereals or name brand whatever. You're getting the more like the Walmart or the Kroger brand stuff to where it's not, or whatever store you go to. But I guess the value brand, or I don't know what the general term is, discount brand, whatever you want to call it. Um, Walmart's is great value, I think. Um, but that's where the lower income individuals already are. That's the stuff they're already buying. And so if the prices, even if the prices go up in tandem between like a name brand item and their off brand one, um, then the people who normally buy the name brand one can knock down into the off brand. And so they can pay that lower price and not really have much of a difference in their overall expenditures. Whereas someone who is already on the off brand stuff, they can't downgrade anymore. They're already at the bottom of the ladder in that respect. So there's that. And that's one of those things. I mean, especially if you're buying like regular stuff, like I buy a lot of oats. I always just get the great value oats because it's like it's just one ingredient. There's nothing special in it. Just because it has the Quaker person on the front doesn't make it any different. It's literally just oats. Like, come on. Um, I don't know. A lot of the times it just makes more sense to do that anyway. At least from my perspective. But the final reason, beyond the variation in inflation that comes from households buying different goods, research also shows that differences in inflation can result from households paying different prices for identical goods. And so basically, she brings up the buying in bulk, right? And so people of higher income can afford to buy more stuff in bulk. And so if the price goes up, they can stock up on stuff before it goes up too high. Whereas the people who are in lower income, they can't participate in the arbitrage play in a way. Not really the definition of arbitrage, but kind of. Um, so it's like if the price of rice doubles. Um, Before it doubles, the person can go of higher income can buy more. Um, then and have enough to last for months on end, whereas the person of lower income can't buy as much and can't get as far, and so they have a higher risk of having to pay the higher prices. Um, so yeah, let's see. Variations in prices paid for identical goods could reflect differences in the ability of some households to stock up when prices are discounted or to buy in bulk and save. Options only available to households with the means to buy in larger quantities, adequate capacity to store larger quantities, or the flexibility to delay purchases if there is an opportunity to save in the future. Um, not I don't know so much on the flexibility to delay the purchases. I mean, I understand where she's going, but it's still more so on, I guess, the adequate capacity to store larger quantities. Um, I'd assume that this adequate capacity that she's alluding to comes from in the form of like a larger house, right? People with higher incomes typically have bigger houses, and so they have more storage space, or they can rent more storage space or whatever. And either way, they can tend to be more resourceful in where they can put their stuff. Um, so, anyways, to continue, in addition, evidence suggests that inflation could be lower for items purchased online rather than from brick and mortar stores, suggesting that households who do not have full access to online shopping options could face a higher cost of living. One study of online transactions made between wow, 2014 and 2017 found that online inflation averaged more than 1% point per year lower than the equivalent CPI measure of relevant product categories. Um, I guess it kind of makes sense because you're only really transporting it. Well, I don't know, because you still have to transport it to the distribution center, and then from there it gets shipped to the household. But it's also like sometimes finding books, like you can like for Amazon or whatever. I buy a lot of books, which is the only reason why I bring up this example. You can look at discount book websites like Alibris, or there's another one that's skipping my mind right now, or Amazon, and then there's Amazon. Well, a lot of the times, like if you like price check the two, they're either the same or one of them slightly lower. And so basically, it's kind of the same comparison between, like, say, buying stuff on Amazon versus like going and buying it at some store, whether that be a small family grocery store or whatever the case may be. Um, but yeah, that's all for this one. I'm gonna try to get my hands on the white paper, or I mean, working paper technically, that goes more into the how the different quartiles, like income quartiles, changed versus the overall CPI. But I'll look more into that, um, and we'll see how that goes. But anyways, that's all I got for this one. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I will see you on the next one.